We waited enough. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jonathan, the VP Marketing of ARMO, and I will be your host for today's webinar. If you went missing, if you have any Q&A during the webinar, you may ask us questions using the Q&A button on your Zoom platform. We will leave a few minutes at the end to answer some of the questions. I hope we can answer all of them. And of course, this webinar will be recorded, and you will get from us the link to view the recording, and also we'll share with you a white paper that we wrote about this topic. So let's start. If you went missing for the last few months and you didn't hear about the SolarWinds attack, it is considered to be the biggest attack of 2020, if not in history. Who was compromised? 425 enterprises out of the US Fortune 500 list, the top 10 US telecommunication companies, the top 5 US accounting firms, all branches of the US military, the Pentagon, the State Department, as well as hundreds of universities and colleges worldwide. And if you were hoping the SolarWinds hack was going to be one-off, you're out of luck. Expect more sophisticated and complicated attacks of the same type to come along sooner or later. And this is what this webinar today is going to be all about, in the context of cloud-native environments and the security implication of it. Let's recap for a sec before we dive in. It all began around mid-December when FireEye, one of the leading cybersecurity companies, reported it was hacked and several of its tools were stolen. The malware spread using malicious version of Orion, which is a SolarWinds software. Attackers also gained access to applications with privileged access to Office 365 and Azure infrastructure. The malware collected information about the victim network in infected systems, waited about 12 to 14 days, and then sent this data to the attacker's remote server. Later on, it was believed that Russia, Cozy Bear, notorious group, is behind it. So let's dive in. Sorry, before that, just yesterday, another report said that SolarWinds is still releasing patches to some vulnerabilities it's still finding, meaning this thing is still going on and we are not at the end of it. So let's dive in. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. With me, Amir Koshensky and Leonid Sandler, which are both these gentlemen have vast experience in the cybersecurity area, and especially in the cloud-native environments. Today, Amir is the VP product of ARMO, and Leonid is the CTO and the co-founder of ARMO. So I suggest we dive in and let's let the show begin. Leonid, take it away from here.
Hello, everybody. Let's go to the next slide first. Great. So let's start from having a quick look how the SolarWinds maps into a well-known cybersecurity kill chain phases. As you can see here, part of those phases run twice. The backdoor and the first part of the malware is the backdoor, which was inserted into a SolarWinds application and then downloaded by all the customers. And that provided command and control interface to initiate the second phase of the attack. And the second phase was done by the malware and a malware payload, which we'll discuss in more details later. Next slide, please. So first of all, the backdoor. The backdoor was installed by inserting malicious code into the SolarWinds Orion product. That malicious code was called Sunspot, and it was used to compromise the SolarWinds infrastructure, probably find the way how to insert source code into the source control and initiate the build of it. Hackers believed to be in the SolarWinds environment for over 6 months. They've learned how the network is mapped and how the processes of software releases work, and apparently compromised corresponding credentials, which would allow them to check in the code into the source control. They've inserted themselves into DLL called a business layer DLL with some bit longer name. And it was subsequently distributed in May, June of 2020 for 2 months. The interesting question here is, why did they stop? Did SolarWinds found this code and removed it but failed to share this information with everybody? Or hackers were careful enough to clean up after themselves to remain undetected? I guess we will never know this answer to this. However, the malicious code was discovered by the FireEye only in December, which means that it was out there for over 6 months. They gave this code a name called Sunburst, and it was relatively rich functionality for a backdoor. Normally, a backdoor would have been a very small piece of vulnerability that was remotely exploited and trying to remain undetected. But this particular backdoor had many security and precaution features. For example, they had start delay, which didn't activate them for over 2 weeks. They had a blacklist of security tools. If you were running, for example, Process Explorer on your computer, the code would never activate. They looked at customer-specific URLs for command and control interface, which means that every customer would communicate with its own backend URL, and that would remain undetected by, as is known, malicious URLs. They didn't activate themselves on the test systems. They used some heuristics to identify the names of the domain names to know which system they're running on. And for example, if you had a staging or test in the name of the domain, they would not activate themselves. They knew how to hide the network traffic in one of the protocols of the Orion product itself, which also made it undetectable by the network anomaly tools. They've replaced some of the system files. They did the short-term replacement, or better to say one-time replacement, and initiated system tasks to basically activate their malicious code, and then replace them back to the original ones. And this raises very interesting question where my antivirus or anti-malware software was, because obviously replacement of the system files should have been triggered the antivirus. And we know that for over 6 months, nobody has found this. So the backdoor provided a command and control interface for some pre-built functions like access network, network information scanning, file access, etc. And most importantly, this function was designed to download additional malware, which in our case was the fileless malware. Let's go to the next slide. A few types of such fileless malware were spotted so far. One is called the teardrop, and one is called the raindrop. Both of them are fileless, as I said, and they actually don't do anything malicious on their own, even though they probably could. But these particular malwares was actually loaders, dynamic loaders of additional payload, which in case of the teardrops was taken from a legitimate or legitimately looking JPEG file with all the proper headers, but the payload of that JPEG file was actually encrypted malware, which is called the Cobalt Strike beacon. The Cobalt Strike beacon is interesting because it's a known tool. It was designed for people in the red teams and also used by hackers, but it has a known signature. It should have been identified by any antivirus and anti-malware software. However, because it was encrypted and set in this JPEG file encrypted, it was not identified and actually managed to run in the memory using a fileless malware techniques, which of course was a smart reuse of the existing software. Next slide. Now, the actual attack was performed by this Cobalt Strike beacon or any other type of the payload that teardrop or raindrop would have been downloaded. These attacks did what we would expect from any attacks to do. They would do network mapping. They would move laterally and infect the neighbors. They'd find credentials, and in fact, Some of them actually managed to find the credentials for legitimate remote access connections. And if they did, they removed the remote access capabilities of this particular malicious software and started to use legitimate remote access to be undetected. They, of course, escalated privileges and did a lot of data exfiltration. We know that the attack has started by FireEye figuring out that most of their sensitive software were exfiltrated. The one interesting thing also to note is that they've tried to look at the keys for token generation systems like SAML tokens, which would allow them to generate SAML tokens for any type of resources in the customer network without being actually dependent on the SAML generators. And this happened undetected for 6 months. So apparently FireEye has very good detection system to code them, but it was already too late because sensitive data was already exfiltrated. So in summary, next slide. We know that there are many vectors how allowing exploited software or malicious software to penetrate our systems. The third-party vendors, the open sources, Docker images, examples that we download from Stack Overflow and put in our code. All of them are potentially malicious. All of them can potentially have backdoors that attackers can use. And of course, not to forget the insiders. So attackers want to reuse their code and they do it very smart. They use stealth technologies like fileless malware, encryption, polymorphic code, etc. And we have to have tools to be that are able to identify them. And of course, modern attacks require very sophisticated and pretty lengthy mapping processes in order to understand what to attack, what is around me, what protocols should I use, what vulnerabilities should I exploit, and therefore, most likely the attacker will always need additional malicious code, just like we saw with the teardrops and raindrops, bringing additional malicious code in order to attack a particular environment. And that malicious code is specifically designed for the attacking of that environment, which is make it very hard to detect. So now Amir will tell us how we can overcome this. Amir?
So Leonid, I'm trying to understand what is the big fuss around SolarWinds. I mean, we are seeing all these techniques that have been used before, and I'm going to show where they were used before. And I'm kind of trying to think why it is so interesting. So, you know, if we look at the supply chain attacks, these kind of attacks, they happened before. You know, we've seen it in the news from time to time that someone hacks these platforms that people consume software from. Here I brought a quote from ASUS that someone used ASUS to distribute malware to millions of customers. We know about the breach that happened a year ago to DockerHub, and the attackers stole 190,000 credentials of users. And people don't know if now in DockerHub you have malicious containers that are just sitting there waiting for someone to use them. And just last week, Perl.com was breached, and maybe if you're using Perl and you're downloading packages, you're downloading something malicious. And if we talk about evasion, malware is being sophisticated and know how to evade being detected. It's not new, you know, it happens for years. If you go to Checkpoint, they have a nice research project where you can see a lot of evasion techniques against sandboxing, against antiviruses. And we know that malwares today are getting more and more sophisticated in a way that modern antiviruses and even EDRs cannot detect them. And the last thing, if we think that, you know, the fact that the attacker goes and tries to fetch things, strategic things like credentials or certificates that will give them the ability to breach data from cloud without the need to stay in your network. Again, it happened before. We know that in Heartbleed, attack against Equifax, they stole the SSL keys. We know that for Lockheed Martin, in order to attack Lockheed Martin, someone already exploited the RSA and stole the RSA tokens and used that as part of their attack. And I don't know if you remember, if you're as veteran as I am, about 10 years ago, someone broke into a certificate authority in Holland called the DigiNotar and basically installed their root CA and had the ability to create forged certificates on their own. So the thing, in my opinion, that blows our mind is the fact that it happened to these big companies, and I guess, without knowing much, I guess that they all had a decent security stack. They were working with leading vendors. These are government agencies, but still, we, the industry, we failed to detect and prevent this kind of attack, and it took too much, and it was too late. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that right now, the industry talks a lot about, can you go back, please? The industry talks a lot about scanning and shift left and posture and misconfiguration. While these are really, really important parts of your security strategy, it's not enough. Clearly, the code was there. It was signed by Microsoft. It was a legit code. The update was there. You could have scanned it, no matter how you do it, and practically it would have never been found. And we have it today. We consume a lot of code from Git. We take a lot of containers from DockerHub. We scan them for known vulnerabilities, but do we really know who's behind it, who's writing the code there? What risk are we adding to our environment? And then the last thing that I want you to think about is that once I entered your network, let's say in the SolarWinds attack, even though we are able to detect it now or to prevent it now, do we know what happened in FireEye, for example, in their network? What happened in networks that were already breached with this malware? Is it game over or just a beginning of a new game that we are yet to understand? And I think that we are starting to see some breadcrumbs coming, in the news in the past days, saying, we found other malicious behaviors, we found other vulnerabilities, but I think it's the tip of the iceberg, and we don't know what is really there. So I want you, since nothing was new here, and I think I've proven that the techniques were not new here. I think in the last few attacks, last few breaches, attackers were using new techniques that are specifically to cloud or specifically to workloads, and I do want to share with you these problems, because I will not be surprised if we will see them in the coming future. I really hope that once we will see them, we will not be surprised and say, hey, this is a new attack, this is a new thing coming. It's there, it's already happened. However, I'm sad to see that the industry doesn't understand the severity of these problems. So I will start with the first problem, which is secret zero. And the idea with secret zero is I have a workload. This workload is running in the cloud, and then I need to send a password to this workload. How can I do that without compromising the password? So, you know, what we do in the industry, we have tokens. So we replace passwords with tokens, and we say to ourselves that tokens. Can you click? Yeah, and we say that password is now protected because we have the password somewhere, and we're replacing it with a token. But how can you protect the token? I mean, it's a chicken and an egg problem. If you protect the token, now you need another token to protect the token, and it's an endless loop. So how do we protect this secret, and how do we prevent someone else taking the secret and using it from a different location, a different source? While in the consumer market, we kind of solve it with MFA, multi-factor authentication. I haven't seen anyone solving it in the cloud and workload protection domain. The next problem, is the granularity of identity. So let's say I have two machines, two VMs, two containers, whatever, in my cloud. One is running Nginx in a VM labeled as web, and the other one is an SQL process running in a machine called DB. And then I create a policy saying web can talk to DB. What I really meant is that the Nginx process will talk to the SQL service, because there is no reason for the Nginx to talk with the DB machine itself. And again, it happens in Kubernetes, and it happens in Amazon, in EC2, and in VM, in Microsoft. You name the infrastructure. What happens is when a malicious actor enters my environment, whether it's a container, a pod, a VM, whatever, immediately it inherits the identity of the machine where I'm located. And then basically the malicious software can talk to the SQL server because you explicitly allowed it, right? You said that web can talk to a DB. But was this your intention when you allowed web to talk to the DB? I'm not sure. By the way, this is exactly what happened in Capital One case. The attacker allegedly went to the machine, and then using the IAM capabilities that the EC2 machine had, they were able to take all the content with an S3 sync command. Oh, sorry. The last problem that I do want to share with you is regarding fileless malware. You know, we know that this thing is out there. If you read the industry reports and articles from time to time, you find out that fileless malware is being used a lot in the past few years. And again, it's kind of a mystery for me. How come we are trying to solve this challenge by looking not in the right places? We put agents, you know, as sidecar on the host. We collect EDR activities, but fileless malware is running in a different layer. If you really want to stop a fileless malware, if you really want to understand if a fileless malware exists and what it is doing to your environment, you need to be in the memory of the process. And that's why it's very important to be located in the right place. So before we jump to the demo and kind of show you what we're doing, I want to tell you in 5 seconds what we at ARMO are doing. So basically, what we do, we create an identity for each workload, and then using this identity, we give zero trust capabilities, and we protect the data at use, in transit, and at rest. It's a layered approach, so you, the customer, can choose whatever he wants to trigger, whether he wants to get only the observability layer or the fileless malware prevention, and so on and so on. The magic and the real beauty of it is that it's not privileged. You don't need to change your code. It seamlessly integrates with your existing application. And it's a true magic. You can go to our website and start a free trial anytime you want. And now I will hand it over to Ben to show us a very interesting demo of how a similar attack to the attack that was described by Leonid is happening, and how it can be prevented.
Thank you, Amir. I'm going to share my screen. So welcome to everybody. I'm Ben. I'm VP R&D in ARMO and co-founder. So what I'm going to show you today is a really fast demo because we don't have much time. But what I'm going to show you today is what are the capabilities of ARMO's fileless malware detection and capabilities. And we're going to show you a simple system, a simple e-commerce system, in two separate cases. One case is a simple security stack, where in that simple security stack, we are going to show you how the container scanning and eBPF-based detection tools are faring against a malware, a real fileless malware. Because in this demo, we are going to use the Esri dropper or memory loader, which is, although it wasn't part, as far as I know, of the SolarWinds attack, but attacks before that and after that use that a lot. This is a malware which is used to hide the actual attack code, the attacker agent, from the detection tool. And we've used it in order to demonstrate to you the capabilities. We've added it into the solution, this malware attack. And what it does is essentially wrapping around an existing code. And when it starts in the memory after a while, just in the SolarWinds attack, it decrypts the actual attack code in the memory. The attack code is never written into the disk. It lives in the memory, therefore it is really hard to detect it, and we'll show you how we are going to detect it in runtime. So again, in the first step, I'm going to show you an e-commerce system which is protected, running on Kubernetes, and protected by image scanning and Falco security stack. We are going to trigger a new release of one of the components in this microservice-based architecture, and we're going to show you how secrets are stolen from this system. In the second phase, I'm going to show you, when using ARMO, how the same release cycle is triggered, and how ARMO is detecting in memory the malicious software, how we are preventing this, the stealing of top secret information, and how we are enabling the forensics team to understand what's happened in the system beforehand. So let's jump right into that. So this is live demo, so hopefully everything is up and running. So what you see here is a Kubernetes cluster in Google Cloud. We are running here Google's demo shop called Online Boutique, or older name was Hipster Shop, where you can go around and buy stuff in this system. So if you want to look into it, you can take it from GitHub. We've taken it, and this is a simple microservice architecture-based system with a front-end component, for which we are seeing here the UI of this shop. So, as I said before, the first thing is that we are protecting the system with Falco and understanding what's happening lifetime in the system by looking into the Falco logs, event logs. So again, the system is up and running, and I am as the operator of this system, I want to upgrade to the next version of the front-end software which runs this website. So I get the container image name. I'm going to Quay.io, which is Red Hat hosted Docker repository, and I'm looking into the component, and I'm looking at this image. I want to upgrade this to this 0.2.2 image, and I see that the security scan 3 days ago passed, and no manifest shows no vulnerabilities in this image. So I feel pretty safe to trigger an upgrade. So what I'm going to do is I'm triggering in Kubernetes a download of a new version. As you can see, Kubernetes said that the front-end component was patched, and actually we have started to run the new version. So if I going here again and looking into the web shop is working. And if I'm looking into Falco's output, I can see that there are different events here, but they're not really connected to my front-end component. I don't see here anything about front-end component. It complains about some kube system component which is going wrong. But from the attacker point of view, right now the weak team has just installed the vulnerable software with the malware inside. So now comes the hacker, which knows that the IP, because this is not a public IP, is running from right now, and the attacker is trying to connect this one and connect its own backdoor. So if you see that by connecting the IP of this front-end component, I was able to open a reverse shell on this machine based on this Azure malware. And right now I have a shell inside that machine, which is running in Google Cloud in the Kubernetes cluster. So as an attacker, I want to steal the SSL private keys from this machine, because I know that they are here. So I'm trying to steal it. Okay, so as you can see here on the screen, I was able to extract a private key. And if you have noticed, in the background, there was no event triggered by Falco. So some kind of Kubernetes component is itching to Falco, but nothing related to this front-end component came up. And I, as an attacker, was able to open processes on the victim's microservice, and I was able to extract the private key. From now on, I will be able to masquerade as the real front-end component, and that was the attack, which I did. And without any detection, I was able to steal information. So I want to show you now what's happening in the second system. So I need to switch here. Need to switch my Kubernetes context. So I have another Kubernetes cluster with the same components, the same story, okay, but in this case, instead of protecting my system only with vulnerability scanning and eBPF-based event detection, okay, I've installed ARMO in this cluster, which is in another demo. I will be able to show you how fast it is. But in this case, I'm going to show you that it's pre-installed. And if we are going into looking into the dashboard of ARMO, you can see that ARMO is already detected and gives you visibility what is running within your system. And you can see that the front-end component is running in the same microservice architecture with our full protection. And in this case, in the same case, what I'm going to do is, again, I, as the operator, want to upgrade a new version. Just the same way I might have gone to see the scan results and it was fine. So I'm just patching the new version. And in the background, you know, again, Kubernetes has just installed a new version of the hipster shop front end with the malware inside. So within the malware, within a few minutes, a few seconds, it's going to be up here in the system, and our system is going to detect this security event. And if you can see here that the front-end component has just become compromised, and you can also see here that within the graph that we have identified a security vulnerability and marked it as a compromised workload. If we are going into the incidents page, and hopefully, yeah, it's here. So we can not just detect that something was wrong, but also we can actually tell you that we see that the front-end component is not looking the way it should be looking. And we can see here traces and information we can give for the forensics team in order to understand what's the problem. Now, beyond this, this secret, which I've just shown you in the first part of the demonstration with TS private key, was installed as a Kubernetes secret in this system, and ARMO has started automatically to protect this secret within the pod. So if we are trying to do the same attack just as before, okay, we are trying to connect again with our backend, with our backdoor here. Okay, again, I'm executing the same attack. Host. Again, as an attacker, I was able to enter the machine. Okay, I can show you that again. I'm on the host of this pod, and I'm again as an attacker. I'm trying to steal the key. Right, you can see here that I see the SL private key, so I'm trying to extract it. You can see here gibberish. You don't see the actual keys because the actual keys are encrypted, and only the protected and validated processes in the runtime are able to access the secret. And in this case, ARMO not just detected the actual attack, but also prevented the extraction of the secrets from the pod. And this was the demo we wanted to show you. I'm returning to you, Jonathan.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Ben. Amir, back to you.
Yeah, so the last thing I want you to take out of this presentation is that attackers are using all techniques, but they're using it in a more sophisticated way, much more sophisticated way. And we as the industry, we need to do something that deals with this challenge. Scanning containers or scanning for posture it's great, but it will not find everything. And if you want to run your application securely, you need something to protect your runtime as well. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think that now we are open for a Q&A. So if you have any question, please drop it in the chat. And Jonathan, you're watching the chat?
Yes, there is a chat and also the Q&A button that can be used. If anyone has any question, we're more than happy to answer. I will mention that everyone that joined and registered will get an email from us with a link to see the webinar recorded, and also with a white paper that we wrote on this attack and implication on cloud-native environments and how to secure them. Of course, if anyone wants to talk with us in private, to see the demo one-on-one, please do contact us, and we're more than happy to have a follow-up. Let's see if we have any questions. Yeah, I see one question here. Amir, I think this one is for you. Or Leonid, each one of you, I see here a question. If there is one thing that we need to learn from the SolarWinds attack, what would it be? Let's start with you, Amir.
So I think that the take from my side is that we need to be to do something in runtime. Again, this is my take. We've kind of, mainly in cloud, we've kind of shifted left, but we forgot that we still have this attack surface, that things might come from runtime, and we need to protect this runtime environment. And with an environment that is constantly changing, sometimes 5 times a day, we kind of left it, and it's not a surprise that someone is able to break into your application. What do you think, Leonid?
Well, first of all, I absolutely agree with you, and this is really the Achilles heel of many security attack vectors. And one thing that I would probably want people to take out of this is that software is and will always remain vulnerable. IBM did a study showing that the number of vulnerabilities in the software is basically proportional to number of lines of code. And we need to understand that it's almost impossible to protect everything. Somebody said that 51% of images on the DockerHub have critical vulnerabilities in them. The keyword is critical here. It's not just any vulnerability. All the critical vulnerabilities can be exploited and utilized to inject malicious code into the system. Attackers are getting much more sophisticated, and they use stealth technologies, fileless malwares, and if you don't detect them in the runtime where they are, and it's the only place where they are, you won't be able to protect yourself.
I see we have a question here regarding when deploying cloud recently, lots of security software interfered with the deployment. How does a customer validate your software? Amir, maybe that's one for you.
So that's a great question. The amazing thing with us, you don't need to change your architecture. Basically, we add our ARMO guard, our ARMO fabric to your application. You can think about it as something that is running with your application, and it doesn't require any changing in your cloud settings nor the application itself. So we are not asking you to compile with us like Rust, or we are not asking you to insert us to your code. It's really seamless, and you know, when I first saw it, I thought I saw a magic, but it works. So you know, I encourage you to try it.
Leonid, I think we have a question here for you. You stated that only validated process in runtime can extract secrets. Can you expand on how that works?
Yes, of course. It's a very good question. The validated process in our terms means that we know exactly what is in that process, what executable files are running in there, what interpreted files are running there, how it's configured, what the command line, what is environment variables, everything that can influence on the behavior of that application is going into the account to generate this identity. We mentioned this, we call this identity. It's basically a second factor authentication. It's DNA. It's based on what you are and how you configure and where you run. So in the example that Ben shown, basically you run in the same container. The cat runs in the same container as the legitimate process. But when legitimate process reads the file, the process is validated and the file is decrypted on the fly. While the other application, which is not signed and not authorized to receive that particular information, will not be able to decrypt it. So, you know, in the most generic case, even if attackers manage to penetrate into your environment, when they run next to your legitimate application, inheriting exactly the same capabilities of the machine, of the container, of the pod, the identity, it doesn't really matter, because if you don't have the right DNA, you won't be able to access storage, you won't be able to access network resources. This is how we associate the identity with authorization and allow you accessing particular artifacts that you're looking for.
I see we have one more question. In your methodology, you're checking for changes in images. So if an image change, then do something. I guess the question is, how do we monitor changes and what we do if a change happens? Amir, do you want to take this one?
I think, yeah. So you know, I don't want that, you know, people that see this webinar or participate in the webinar will think that we're only doing runtime security. We're also doing, and we strongly believe that hygiene is important. You know, we're just saying that it's not the only thing that you need. So we do vulnerability scanning, and we monitor the pipeline, and we see when new versions come out. And when these versions come out, we know what are the changes. As Leonid said before, we understand the software, we understand how it runs, what are the executables and binaries that are being used and loaded. And we also scan for vulnerabilities, so we know what changed, what layer changed in the container, and we track that as well. So yes, we understand what are the nature of the changes, and we do track them.
Yeah, and also, if I may, I want to add that to be clear that we are not triggering our alarms on software update. We are triggering the alarms on software update, which are showing changes that are not related to the original software. So the original software is being signed and validated, and if it's okay, then we are allowing it. If it's a software which behaves differently than it looks, and it looks and the software integrity is broken, then we trigger the alarms.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed and learned a few things about SolarWinds and cloud native environments. I would like to thank our presenter today, Amir and Leonid and Ben. And again, if anyone has any more questions, please reach out to us and we will gladly schedule a follow-up meeting. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everybody.